It's KC 101, your hometown country station. It is time for another edition of Saturdays with Seniors. It's brought to you by Hemingway General Contractor. When you're in the market for a new furnace, call Alan or Brian Hemingway and learn more about Luxair furnaces and the financing options available. Not only do they sell and install furnaces, but they service any and all furnaces, and they have parts on hand for repairs. Call or text Hemingway General Contractor at 662-6997. That is 570-662-6997. And I've got Larry Mase in the studio today. Good morning.
Good morning.
And you are from the Liberty area.
Yes, I am.
And how old are you?
I'm 88.
88 years old. Well, we want to take a little trip back in time, find out a little bit about your life growing up. And where were you born?
I was born in Liberty on a dairy farm right in the borough of Liberty.
Right in the borough of Liberty. So no hospital, the doctor came to the house?
No, I probably was born in the Williamsport Hospital.
Okay.
But Liberty was my birthplace, actually.
Okay. And what did your parents do?
Unfortunately, my father was killed about 7 months before I was born.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry to hear that.
And I was the youngest of 5 children. My mother had 5 children under the age of 11 when Dad got killed.
Oh, wow.
He was killed in an accident in the feed mill that he owned and operated in Liberty at that time.
And your mother, what did she do for a living?
Well, she was there on the farm,
right.
And she did a lot of work after Dad was dead with the help of some neighbors and a young man that came as a hired man for a while and an old man that came and lived with us for a few years. She managed to get control and then kept the farm going until my older brother took it over.
What kind of farm was it? Was it a dairy farm?
Yes, it was a small dairy farm.
Yep.
Well, there weren't any big farms in those days.
Right.
You know, we were looking back in 34, and it was close to the end of World War II before the farms really started to grow in size, you know, because
Yep.
it wasn't any refrigeration, that type of stuff.
Yeah, and farming back then, I mean, you didn't have milkers. You had to do it all by hand. You didn't have plows. You didn't, I mean, it was all done by horse back then, so.
And we still had horses up to the time I was a junior in high school.
Wow.
I still mowed hay right along with horses. We did have a tractor by then. My brother had a tractor because he owned a farm, and I worked for him in the summertime and did chores night and morning.
So tell me about where did you go to school?
Right in Liberty.
Now, was that a one-room schoolhouse or?
Well, Liberty itself had a 2-room school.
Okay.
But in the surrounding areas, there were about 5 or 6 one-room schools in East Point and, you know.
Oh, yep.
The high school at that time was in downtown Liberty over top of the bank and the grocery store.
Oh, very interesting.
And
wow.
That's where I graduated from, and I was in the last class that did graduate from that school in 1952. And the new Liberty Joint School was built up and opened up on the hill there that's still there today.
Yep. What was a typical school day like when you were, in grade school?
Well, the first 4 grades was taught by one teacher. The second 4 grades, we had one teacher that taught all 4 grades there from 5 through 8. Catherine was probably the best school teacher I ever had in my life, although I didn't know it at the time. But
right. Were you involved in any sports in school? Or?
Well, not in grade school. The gymnasium was in a separate building between the high school and the grade school, and it actually was the Liberty Jackson Library, and part of that building was the basketball court. It's still there. It's actually used as a church today, but it was a very small basketball court. The visiting teams that came in and played there really found it amusing. The baskets were attached right solid to the wall. There wasn't enough room that you could go in under the basket.
Yeah, right.
And we played, and when we'd go away from home and get on a bigger court where you could run under the basket, we were about lost,
Yeah.
Just a totally different thing. But.
Yeah. What happened if you got in trouble in school? Did you get a paddle or did you get a slap on the wrist?
Well, I got a lot of paddlings, I'm sure. Down like in 5th grade, and at sometime when we were 5th or 6th grade, my friend and I kind of got goaded in by a couple older boys to say something nasty to the school teacher, and to this day I don't remember what we said, but we were about the right age and we might have known a little cuss word or something,
yes, right.
And whatever it was, we said it, and she didn't. That was Mrs. Bryan, and she didn't really say a word to us. And when the bell rang to go back after the lunch hour, and the first thing you said was, she named off the 4 of us and said we would report. There was a 3rd room in that building that was vacant. We were wanted back at that back room.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we walked into the back room, there was the principal from down at the high school. And he was a big man and had a little bit of a temper. You know, he told us that our behavior was absolutely unacceptable, and he was going to make sure that didn't happen again. And he started with the biggest boy on the far end for me, simply picked him up by the shirt and slapped him across the face.
Oh, wow.
4 good hard whacks and set him down and just worked his way down my way. And I know I was standing there, I probably weighed 100 pounds at that time. And
wow.
I thought, he's not going to be a problem picking me up. He picked me up and whacked me across the face a few times, and then explained to us that if that occurred again, he would be back up and could do that performance much more severely.
And I'm sure you learned from that a little bit.
I never spoke like that to a teacher again in my life. I may have thought of it.
I can't say as I blame you.
That pretty well cured me of that, I can tell you.
So you grew up in the Liberty area. What did you do for fun when you were a kid?
Well, there wasn't much around. We were down at the ball field every night. Mm-hmm. Baseball was really the thing in the summertime. The local town team was down there practicing a couple nights a week, so I couldn't stay away from the ball field. If there was a ball around there, I was going to be down there.
Oh, yeah, right.
Quick as we got done at chores at home, and I'd go down and chase fly balls along with the regular town team guys, you know, and run down their foul balls and go get the ones that went in the creek and such things as that. There wasn't really much entertainment going on.
When you were a kid, did you ever go to the movies, or did you go?
Oh, yeah. During World War II, of course, we had an old 1941 Chevy, which I guess Mom got it as a demonstrator right at the start of the war. And, of course, from then on, you couldn't buy cars. There were no automobiles. That was used as a truck and everything else. But, yeah, we went to Blossburg, the Victoria Theater. That was a big deal. Not very often, but once a month, some big film were out.
Do you remember the first movie you saw in theaters?
Not really. I do remember that one of my friends that lived up on another farm, I can remember inviting him along to go to the movies, and came down to our house and had dinner, and then went along with the family to the movies boss. And occasionally the barber in town took myself and his son down to Williamsport to the Gray's baseball teams that was at that time. That was a big deal, because otherwise I would never gotten there. But
right.
I've always remembered Mr. Brown for being kind enough to take me along with his boy, and a couple times in the summer we'd go to the baseball game downtown.
Now, when you went to the movies, it's different now. Like when you go to the movies now, you got all these previews for upcoming movies. But back then, I believe there's a cartoon and a newsreel before the actual movie.
Yeah, that was the tail end of World War II. They always had the upcoming latest news reels from the European battlefields, and you know where the Germans were invading places. And I can remember seeing the Stuka dive bombers blasting, bombing the cities and towns, and that was always prior to the movie itself coming on.
Yep. Getting your news was a lot different back then. Now you can just get on the internet, you can see everything that's going on. But back then, you either had to get it from the radio or you had to get it from the newspaper.
Well, we got a lot from the radio, but the radio was very poor in downtown Liberty. You couldn't get stations very good. But I can remember, sitting up close to it, and everything was AM at that time, and it would fade out, and then you'd wait, and then it would come back, and you'd have it good enough so you could hear it. But we did get a daily newspaper. Several of the kids around town had jobs delivering to different streets in the town. My sister delivered newspapers around town.
Very interesting. Tell me about your first job. What was your first job?
Well, my first job away from home was in the fall of 1952, because I stayed working for my brother on the farm that summer, and come fall, of course, that was done. I got a job at J.P. Ward Foundry. I was only 17 years old, so I couldn't run any machinery or anything, so I did a lot of sweeping floors and a lot of shoveling, and very definitely starting at the bottom.
Oh, yes, right. Now, do you remember what you made an hour?
$1.23.
$1.23 an hour.
And that was big money, because the local, like the milk plant, was the big employer in Liberty at that time, and I don't think any of them were paying over 85 cents, somewhere in that area. I worked there that one winter for 6 months, but I soon decided, being in that factory and all the noise and banging and crashing, and I was used to being out in the field in the spring, and things were quiet and the sunlight. And there I had a neighbor, a farmer actually, who worked out there, and he agreed that I could ride along with him every day, but he said he milked cows early in the morning and then headed for the foundry, and he said, I'm going to be running the last minute, and when I stop in front of your house, you better be here at the door, because if you're not, I'm gone. So I paid 25 cents a day to ride to the Lost Foundry with him. But I got the job was $1.23. That was pretty good for.
Yeah.
But that was day rate, and some of the the men working piece rate. Well, I was making what? That'd be $12 a day or something.
Yeah.
And they were making, the man I rode with made $35.
Oh, wow.
They were pouring steel,
Yeah.
And I probably would have stayed a little longer, but then the first thing, the foundry at that time, they never laid off, but they would just cut down from 4 days to 3 days.
Right, right.
And I had, of course, bought a car like any kid would and had car payments to make. And first thing I knew, they're backed off to 4 days, and then they went down to 3 days, and that was coming towards spring, and I wasn't very happy there anyway. And I told my mother, I said, well, I'm going to be looking for a different job. I don't like this in here, and I can't make my car payments once. So I left there and took a job working in the woods for my uncles for 85 cents an hour. But we got 60 hours a week. And
so it's steady work, and you were making the money to make your car payments.
And I was outside
doing what
where
you
I wanted to be.
Yep, there you go. You had mentioned your first car. What was your first car?
The 1949 Chevy.
Do you remember how much you paid for it?
$600.
$600. Wow.
Yep.
Can't even think about that today.
No.
I'm sure you drove it around for quite a few years.
Well, I had it for a while, and then I got married the following fall, and then we got a 52 Chevy, I think. And along about that time, my mother died, and I came back to Liberty. She had a part interest in that feed mill, and the family didn't know what to do with that. Nobody wanted it, so I came back and I bought her share of the feed mill. I was there about a year, and then the draft caught me. So time I went to Germany, and as luck would have it, I was able to bring my wife over there for about 11 or 12 months. But on E4's pay, we didn't live very high over there, and the time we got back home, didn't have any money. I turned around and bought another car, paid $600 for that, I think that was a 53 Chevy that had 100,000 miles on it. I didn't keep it only a couple of years, but I didn't really have any money to buy anything better than that.
Right. So let's go back to your time in the military. When were you drafted?
In 1957.
And what did you do in the military?
Well, I was a maintenance man at a Mase hospital. And, of course, there was no war going on at that time.
Right.
So we were never actually activated. We were there. We went out 2-3 times a month and put the hospital up and set it up and got the equipment going and tore it back down and came back in.
And how long were you in the military for?
Just my 2 years.
Just your 2 years, okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Liberty a little bit. Obviously, Liberty is a different place today than it was back then. What are some of the things that are no longer in Liberty that you remember?
When I was little, Liberty had 3 grocery stores. They had 3 garages, 3 gas stations, 2 feed mills, 1 bank. Today, the only thing left of that is 1 bank. There are no gas stations downtown.
Nope.
No grocery stores downtown. No feed mills. They're both gone. Of course, they went, by the way, when the dairy business went down, they both left there. But that's a major difference. And we did have 1 restaurant then, and we still have a restaurant downtown now. But the villages, there's not much there. That's all there is to that.
Right, yeah. And you still live in Liberty?
Well, I live right up next to the high school. Yes.
Okay, yep.
I'm in Liberty Township by 100 yards.
Yep. I'm sure it was very interesting to see how Liberty changed from, your time growing up to what it is now.
Yeah, and if you look back further, Liberty had, back before Prohibition days, there was 3 or 4 hotels, all had bars. Mm-hmm. Every one of them actually over the years burned down, and there are no bars. There's no alcohol in Liberty, period, today, unless somebody's cellar might find some.
Oh, yeah, right. I mean, I'm sure that's probably possible.
Yeah, I think probably you could find some if you went the right place.
Now, we had a guest on Saturdays with Seniors a little while back that was talking a little bit about Buttonwood and how they had gas stations, and it was more of a bigger place than what it is now, too.
Yep. I think that was probably Mrs. Dorothy Krieger, wasn't it?
I think you're right. I think
I think I saw where she was going to be on, and I know that's where Dorothy grew up. Dorothy's sister became my sister-in-law years later. So
very interesting.
Yeah, that was a small community. Once the joint school got in and Cogan House started coming in involved, and Morris made a lot of difference. But prior to that, it was all you knew everybody. They were all next door neighbors, pretty near.
Absolutely. So, Larry, you've got a couple of other stories that you wanted to talk about. Let's hear them.
I can think of one that turned out to be kind of humorous, and it could have been a disaster, but I don't recall the year. It hasn't been too many years ago. The local bank manager was sitting in her front room at the bank, and Liberty Bank at that time closed on Thursdays at noon, where most places Wednesday was normal, it seemed to be. But just a couple minutes at 12 o'clock, she's sitting right in the front room looking out into the street, and he was just getting ready, so she tells me to walk over and lock the door to close, and she saw this car pull up and thought, well, it's going to be a couple of minutes late, but I'm not going to lock the door in their face, And so she didn't lock the door. She stood there and watched and thought she recognized the car, and then this man got out, and as he came around the corner, she realized he had a long gun in his hand. When she realized what was going on, she immediately jumped over and did lock the door quick and told the rest of the tellers and everything to get out of the way. And the man came up and attempted to get in the door, and the door was locked. Turned around, went back and got in his car and drove off. And they recognized the car and got a half the license plate number. Called the state police right away. And, of course, the police came in and it didn't take them but a matter of a few minutes till they had figured out who he was. And they went right up to his house just outside of Liberty in the countryside. Found his car there, the gun in the car, and he just had driven back home and gave up robbing it that day.
Oh, wow.
It was all over in about 2 hours' time. But
wow.
Had she not locked the door right there, it could have been
a disaster.
Could have happened, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
I can recall another goofy thing that young adults do. It's kind of stupid, but
okay.
My brother always attended the Liberty Lodge every Thursday night if we got done milking and chores, and that didn't open till about, I guess, 8 o'clock because most of them were farmers coming in. Mm-hmm. But he never left and got home before 1 or 2 in the morning. And a couple of my friends and I were downtown there, and my brother's pickup sat on the bridge where he always parked at the lodge. And just jokingly, we said, gosh, it's a shame that truck's sitting there and nobody's using it. And so we decided we'd borrow that truck for a little while. Mm-hmm. Went over to get in the truck, and there wasn't any keys in it. And the one lad said, well, it was an old International pickup, said, I know how I can hold a 50-cent piece up on the back of that ignition switch and it'll run. So we jumped in, and he gets out a 50-cent piece, and sure enough, the truck started. So we decided we were going to go to Blossburg, but none of us had driver's license. We weren't old enough to have a driver's license. So we decided we'd drive the back roads, and so we took the back road out through East Point and up over Taylor Run, the dirt road. Mm-hmm. That road was real rough, and as we were going down the other side, every time we'd hit a hard bump, his 50-cent piece would come off. And we'd sit there in the dark for a few minutes till he could get it back on. We went down to the bottom of the hill right by the hillside rod and gun there at the end of the road. And didn't want to drive downtown because Blossburg did have a town cop, and we were heading for trouble there. So we parked up there and we walked downtown and strutted around the village and looked and see what young girls, I suppose, were out, and went in the dairy store and had a milkshake and went in the bowling alley and looked around the village and then walked back up to our truck, which was probably close to 2 miles up there the hillside. Came back home and parked the truck very nicely right where it was. And my brother never knew that. And just a few years ago, we were talking about something, and I said something about, did you ever realize that he had never known the truck was gone? But we got to thinking about it on the way home. Boy, what if he gets out of Lodge and does, for some reason, come out of there at 10:30 or 11 and his truck's gone? We're going to have cops looking for us.
Yeah.
But then we got half afraid. Up to then it was funny, but then we got nervous.
Yeah. Well, Larry, do you have any other advice on how to live a long, successful life like you have?
Well, you got to be lucky.
Well,
that's all I can say. I've had many times that I could certainly have been killed, and you got to be in the right place at the right time or not be in the wrong place at the right time, I guess. Try to not do stupid things, I guess. Help your neighbor and be a good neighbor, and everything will go fine.
Okay.
You still got to be lucky.
That's for sure. One more question. If you had a chance to grow up during the time that you did or grow up today, which one would you choose?
Oh, back when I did versus today, yeah.
It just seems like technology has just overtaken everything, you know? There's not that connection with people as it was back then. People hardly ever go outside anymore. They don't play baseball. They don't go out fishing. They don't, you know. And you were lucky enough to grow up during that time. time where you didn't have to worry about any of that. You know, you just went outside and you played. You didn't.
Every evening you were out playing catch or something. Today you can drive through Liberty, and I think once in the last 5 or 6 years I actually saw one kid in town whose uncle has happened to show up that weekend. They were out in the front yard playing catch.
Society has just lost that, you know?
Yeah, that's gone.
Yep, I agree with you.
And I'm old enough that I can't keep up with the stuff and don't know very much of it, and I hate having a phone that's smarter than I am.
Well, yes. I agree. Well, Larry, thank you for joining us here on Saturdays with Seniors. And if you missed any of this episode or any of the previous episodes, you can go to our website, kc101fm.com. There's a link to our YouTube channel where you can hear this program and all of the prior episodes. And we'd like to thank Hemingway General Contractor for being our sponsor. And not only do they sell and install furnaces, they also service any and all furnaces, and they have parts on hand for repairs. So any service needs that you need for your furnace, call Hemingway General Contractor at 662-6997. That's 570-662-6997 for Hemingway General Contractor.